Hey there, and welcome to the very first edition of the Ultradian podcast. This is my partner, Mike, and we thought we would take a few minutes to introduce ourselves, talk about our history when we were disconnected, and then what brought us back together. The intention of this recording is to obviously do a podcast, but also to post it to our Kickstarter update page. Our Kickstarter is launching this Tuesday at 7:30 a.m., January 6th. Tuesday at 7:30 a.m. So, Mike, hi.
What's up, everyone? How are you? It's good to be here with you and with Pete, who I've known for, 30 years or
Yeah,
so.
yeah,
Yeah, it's been a long one. And yeah, as Pete mentioned, we worked together back in the day at the Shred Shop, and which is a skateboard, snowboard shop for the most part. But then we started selling anything under the sun. Remember, it was
right.
like, let's sell go pads and let's sell bikes and let's sell
And as a skater, you probably had a problem.
maybe a little, But no, and then didn't we sell even like windsurfers for a minute too? I don't
We
know.
did, we did, and I think I
Yeah,
had left by that point. But yeah, it
yeah,
kind of became a flea market. But
yeah.
those were some of the most fun years of my life. We did ridiculous shit over and over again. It was so fun.
Oh my God, we had like permagrin for years. It was just amazing. It was just the funniest thing.
Yeah. Shout out to Chris Bachman.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and it was cool because I think, all of the odd jobs and things that we were doing, it wasn't just like folding t-shirts. It was like, hey, can you guys get up on this ladder and paint this rung of steel or whatever? It was just, completely
I'm,
random things that we did. And I think that totally empowered us. I'm sure it did you for years to come, as far as like doing DIY projects around the house or whatever. You're like, actually, I have a bit of confidence doing this or that because I, did that back then,
You just made me think of a time where I was outside in front of the old shred shop, not the new one, and I was putting bricks in next to the concrete for like the entire span of the frontage and the side. So Chris wanted bricks, which required me to take out some bushes, which required me to do all kinds of things. But it
Yeah.
was hilarious. We had a lot of late night shenanigans too,
Oh man, absolutely.
trips to the
You know,
double door, stuff
yep.
like that.
Yeah. And all the reps, taking them out, making sure they had a good time when they were in town.
Oh boy. Yes, that was a
Yeah.
job.
That was good stuff for sure.
So let's talk about you. Let's talk about what you've been doing for the last 30 years.
So, I mean, it's funny because the reason why I started working at the shred shop was skateboarding related, and that I've stuck with until today. Still do that. Probably not enough, but I think that has stuck with me the entire time. After working at the shop here and there, coming back from breaks from college, even at the shred shop, I did some design work and web related stuff. If you recall, towards the end of my stint there. It's a creative environment, obviously. So, the design thing, definitely was kind of built within, working at the shred shop over the years. And so, obviously then it was more kind of store design, layout stuff. I then kind of went full bore into, learning Photoshop, learning design programs, and then learning web development from kind of the ground up. And my first job out of college at that point was a job where I could kind of learn on the job, and do different marketing type of things. And that's where I learned how to develop websites and, build sites out, and anything design related kind of came from that. And then I just, I've always been more of a designer. And so once I learned how to code and how to do all this stuff, I started to kind of peel back. But once you've gone down that rabbit hole, it's kind of hard to pull back. Once you've actually kind of gotten under the hood and understood what the code did and how to do it, it was great because I was curious about it and I was able to achieve that. But then you also kind of start thinking about what kind of person you are, and you're like, oh man, I don't know if I can spend my whole career resolving some crazy code garbled code thing. After the first couple times you do it, it's a little bit intimidating, and so I kind of pulled back and went more kind of design direction, and then also got into video editing and all that. And I worked on a documentary film called Banana Land Movie, which was super fun. It was for a non-for-profit, and we got together and we built this. We made a movie, which is about a lot of the corruption within the banana industry specifically. So I wanted to get into anything kind of design related, digital marketing related I possibly could. And so I just kind of threw myself into every situation I could to kind of understand as much as I could. And, as I mean, we lived through that, a lot of kind of digital, do you even call it? It's like this amazing time where, amazing and scary. And obviously we'll probably talk about some of the not so good nuances of the digital era, but we used to answer the phone when it was, connected to the wall. And then now we have these distraction things right here, right? So I got to know how to develop those apps and how to design the apps, and
So
so,
specifically, you
yeah.
were doing app development.
So it actually wasn't the coding of those apps. I was working uh, with another friend of ours who in Ethervision, and I was designing the interfaces and the experiences of the apps. And so obviously now we call that UI or UX design. But again, it didn't. I'm sure it probably had a similar name, and maybe that's what it was called. But we were building and developing these different types of experiences, and it wasn't as pigeonholed as it is now, or it wasn't as segmented, I guess, as it is now, where you have your designer and your developer, and then your front end developer, and your full stack developer, and all these different kind of burst out positions to take on the development of an application. And so you kind of did as much as you could do, and then you pass it over to the next guy. And so we built some of these apps with small teams, where we had Randy, who was more strategic. He was the one that was the operator in it, and then there was me, who was the UI design UX guy, who was kind of strategizing on how you use this. But this is even before a lot of these prototyping apps. So you kind of build it out, and then you'd hand it over to a developer, and then they would tweak, if they needed to, kind of tweak your designs a little bit to kind of make it do what you wanted to do. And now it's a lot more turnkey. But that's where after the Shred Shop, I got into a lot of app designing and app concepting. So the concepting and the design, and then passing that over to a developer, and then the developer would chop up all the designs and kind of make it what the initial iOS apps were. So yeah,
That's fascinating.
that's kind of the beginnings of it. And then I went back to corporate after working for myself for a long time, and I was a senior product designer over at Medline for about 8 years, and decided to leave about a year ago and focus on entrepreneurial efforts with you and with a couple other startups. But this is where I'm at right now today, and I'm super excited to be doing this. I've always thought about how things worked and trying to get into the nitty gritty and really kind of do everything on my own. And then once I get to that point, where I can do it, I can sort of scale back to figure out where I actually should be in the process, because it's nice to know how to do all these different things, but also like understand where your limitations are as well.
Sure, absolutely. What's the biggest thing that you're bringing to Ultradian Partners and the Kickstarter?
So, like I said, I think that, there's in our generation of, kind of development, it was different. It's different than it is today. And so I have a wealth of knowledge in a lot of different areas. And so what I'm going to bring to the table is the user experience knowledge, holistic user experience knowledge. So not just looking at a specific screen, but like, what is this? What is the experience as a whole. And for example, I think that nowadays we get into this like kind of system fatigue, and, there's a new era of designers. And I understand that, some things you kind of change over time, but some things should stay consistent once somebody knows something. And so I want to get to that simple, stupid, how do you design and develop something that is really easy for people to understand how to use it, and then get rid of all the other stuff. I think that's what this whole thing is really about, is like, how do you scale back, get rid of distractions, get rid of everything, and just have a pure experience. And I think that, a lot of this stuff's been lost over the years. You have different people touching different projects. You have a huge development team, a lot of designers that are in the mix. We have a small team, we're nimble, but I think that that's an amazing, you don't see that often. That's
Mhm.
something that, is truly unique, I think, nowadays, to have a small team. And as you know, we can do that now because we have a lot of these technologies and AI to be able to kind of streamline this and that process. So one example is I created a meeting the other day using Zoom. And when I did that, it allows you, so you have to painstakingly copy and paste each email into Zoom, because that, yes, you can integrate it with your system, but as an entrepreneur and you have 3 or 4 different Google accounts open, in order, if you want to send your email through Zoom, you literally have to copy and paste every email, which took a while because it was a big meeting. And then after doing that, instead of hitting send, right, you hit save. You hit save on the email that you want to send out through Zoom. Why would you save it? So it's just one example. The other one is people don't think about it. They're like, well, I know how to do it. It's like, but that word doesn't mean that, right? So what's an easy way to do that? Maybe it's send, maybe that's the word I'm looking for. But I feel like there's a lot of, this kind of system fatigue, or, people that are all trying to come to the table to create something, and there's just too many cooks in the kitchen. And so
Mhm.
I think that working with you and kind of designing, developing something that's pure and natural is amazing. And I'm looking forward to it. Another example is when I went to go cancel that meeting because when I sent it out, something was
Mhm.
wrong. So I went to go cancel it. Guess where you go to cancel a Zoom meeting? It's not Zoom, it's
It's your calendar.
Google. It's your Google
Interesting.
Calendar. Right. So, and I'm sure there's people watching this rolling their eyes, but it's like, a lot of this stuff isn't intuitive. And so you go to your Google Calendar, and then if you want to cancel the meeting, you would think that you'd click on a cancel button, because to me, cancel means, you're canceling the meeting and therefore you're going to send the cancel request to all the attendees, right? No, you hit the trash can. You hit the trash can, which to me is like a definitive thing that means you're going to throw this meeting in the garbage, right? That to me doesn't insinuate that you're going to then get the ability to cancel the meeting for everybody. I feel like the trash can is not a good use of UI there. So just an example of kind of how I think things have gotten a little bit lost, and when something is a good, when there's a good use or a good, icon for something, why change that?
Would you say that
Go ahead.
there's a certain amount, well, at least what we're trying to accomplish with Ultradia.io, that there's going to be in our final product, and we're working towards it right now, an elegance and a minimalism that goes along with the product? Would you
Oh,
say that's true?
absolutely. Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that, when you work hand in hand with somebody to develop any sort of application, and like I said earlier, and there's 20 cooks in the kitchen, everyone's got to have a voice, right? When you're, I mean, I'm not saying that we're not going to put this through and make sure it's tested thoroughly, but I think that when you have two people that are kind of coming together that have lived through, the digital age, like we have. You've seen what simplistic is. You've
Hmm.
seen, you know, uh, getting rid of all the cognitive, overload. All that potential. We've seen simplistic, and then people just kind of keep adding in, more and more. So yeah, of course, that elegance, that minimalist feel, that's what we're going for.
That's awesome. Let me do something really quick. Let me talk 60 seconds about myself because it's not all that interesting.
how did you get into the whole concept of Ultradia or Ultradian method, I guess? And,
Sure.
how have you used that in your line of work?
Well, if we go back into the Wayback Machine, like you just talked about, your early experience in developing apps, et cetera, I got into coaching and training entrepreneurs in about 2000. Actually, it was closer to 1998, but I, in earnest, started doing that in 2000. And then we had a really good thing going. And in June of 2007, the iPhone came around and it was such a miraculous, like, it opened up so much for the user and it was used so much for community. And that was the, like, we're all going to be interconnected. We're all going to do these things. Well, naturally, the elevation, the evolution of it is that companies want to capture attention, right, in order to sell ads. And what ended up happening is 2007 to 2010, and the level of absolute distraction was devastating, starting in about 2015. And I knew people that could sit. I mean, for myself, even I will self-diagnose myself is that I could sit and read a book for 3 or 4 hours straight. In about 2015, 2016, I could no longer do that. And I began to really get upset, but I didn't understand what was going on. And then in about 2020, right prior to the pandemic, I'm coaching, over 100 people. And what I began to notice was it was about focus and execution. Those are the two biggest things. And so, I'm currently coaching, over 100 people right now. And I have learned the hard way that in order to get back your level of focus and execution, it requires going through a very uncomfortable withdrawal. And the norm is to be completely addicted to a platform or a device. And the intention behind what you and I call the distraction economy is to literally chop your ability to focus into 4 to 6 minute increments. And you and I have talked about this a lot. I talk about it in the book that people are on average interrupted every 6 minutes of their waking hours. And they check their devices on average 154 times per day. And if this were like an isolated student that couldn't focus and was constantly unable to focus every 6 minutes, this would be an emergent situation. But as a society, we've embraced this digital isolation
Hmm.
and we've embraced distraction as a way of life. And I really think that there's two things that people are absolutely starved for right now. And I talk about this on podcasts, et cetera. There's two things that people are really starved for right now. One is a sense of community. People are starved for community, live, in person, shaking hands, eye to
Hmm.
eye community. People are starved for that. The other thing that's happened in this growing sense of isolation is that people are starved for a sense of community and not starved for a sense of significance. I'm sorry. People are
Hmm.
starved for both community and a sense of significance.
Right.
And what yours and my goal that we've talked about for hundreds of hours already
Hmm.
and the implementation of what we're trying to create with this Kickstarter is we are going to develop a platform for people to engage in collaborative accountability and execution. And I think what's going to happen with this, we're going to get it wrong sometimes. We're not going to do everything the right way. It's going to evolve day by day by day because we have such a strong focus on it. But I think what's going to happen is we're going to create a community of people that begin to resist and rebel against what we call the distraction economy and this bullshit grind culture that's so damaging to people.
Hmm.
And I believe that if we can get someone to focus for even 3 hours a day, we can change their life financially. We can change their life in terms of their self-esteem. We can change all kinds of things for people. And that's what I've been working on for the last 7, 8 years, is trying to help people to get into a rhythm of focus and execution.
Hmm.
But the reason I wrote the book was to tell the story of entrepreneurship, but also to apply my theories of distraction and grind culture and how those things need to change. And that's what leads us to our conversation right now, which is what is it that we're developing? What is it that you and I want to accomplish? I'll tell you in 60 seconds or less what I want to accomplish. I said it just a second ago. I want to create a community of people that are reclaiming their cognitive capacity and living better lives because of it. And it
Hmm.
can be about productivity. It can be about finances. It can be about anything you want it to be. But at the end of the day, you have to have a plan. You have to have the intention of accomplishing the plan. You have to be able to focus for longer periods of time. And you have to execute on the steps necessary to accomplish the plan. And what's fascinating to me is that, I'm working with a woman right now who we're introducing the second sprint, the second 90-minute sprint. So she starts at 7 in the morning. She works till 8:15. She takes a 15-minute break. She starts at 8:30 and she works until 10 or 9:45. And it is so interesting to me, the struggle that she has committing. And I really believe that this is about her committing to herself, right? What is it that you wish to accomplish? Let's commit to that.
Hmm.
Let's make a commitment towards accomplishing something. And the fascinating back and forth that's going on with this person. And we meet once a week, every Thursday for 30 minutes. And she's trying so hard and she's making progress, but she's very, very discouraged. And I think that our product, Ultradia.io, is going to be the answer to that
Hmm.
because because
Yeah.
operating in isolation is very difficult.
Absolutely. And not to mention, I mean, I may have thrown it in there too soon, but the idea of system fatigue, people are using a million different systems. And I think that a lot of people believe that some are productive when they're really not. When I was in corporate and, working in Slack, having that thing open all day, total distraction. It was just literally sitting in your desktop. And I get it. When you're working with a team, you need to have that kind of ability to talk to somebody. And at that point, email was archaic already. When I first started working, with that team, you check email a few times a day, but when you're working with the development team, you need to be in touch with them. But to your point, I think that you could make time for that, right? If you
Hmm.
have a focus where you're, designing some sort of feature or function, you need that dedicated time to deliver and to design something that is meaningful and a great experience. And then after that chunk of time, that 90-minute time is up, then you can approach your meeting times, right? Maybe
Hmm.
there's another 90-minute where you have a few meetings or whatever, and then you go back to working on some sort of a project. But yeah, I think that, that's really needed now. I think that there's a lot of systems out there's so many systems out there. And yeah, it's just, it's tiring to use all this and really understand how to use it and how to be productive using it
Hmm.
as well. And can you?
Can we talk about your daughter's screen time for a second?
Oh, yeah. So, with a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old, that you start to realize nowadays, like how much kids are really using these devices. And it's troubling for sure. And I think that that's another reason why this project hit home, because I realized that that's important, obviously, to regain that for them, to regain the ability to be able to disconnect. And
Hmm.
it was up there the other day. But that was a day where she was home from break and she wasn't feeling great. And so, it was obviously too high. But and I'm sure I'm not alone. There's probably a lot of parents out there that are, and it's like, now as we spoke the other day, there's these different apps and gadgets you can get that literally will be able to your phone, meaning like turn off all the notifications, which, is great. It's a crutch, as you know, and it's great that exists. But really, I think that what we're trying to do is teach behaviors, right? We're
Hmm.
trying to teach a better behavior. Remove the phone from the room. There's definitely been studies that of kids that are further from the phone in time of study, and they're doing better in school because their phone isn't even in the room. Like there's a correlation between how close you are to your device and how much good focused study time that you're going to have.
It's fascinating, actually. I was just thinking while you're talking, schools attempt to do almost an ultradian rhythm. You're in class for what, 50 minutes, 45 minutes, and then you get 5 minutes to go to your
Right.
next break.
Especially high schools.
especially high schools, right? And I have a friend who's a very successful artist, and she paints for roughly 6 hours a day, a single day, thousands and thousands of paintings. And her paintings became very focused because they were are successful and famous because they were used on a show that a lot of people watched. And the main character was an artist, and they used my friend's art to do that. And I said to her, I said, Nancy, how is it that you are able to focus? And she said, I have nothing to distract me. I've created a completely distraction free zone. And it's taking me years and years to develop these habits. And so I think what's interesting with what we're trying to create is that we are behavior focused. And in order for you to focus on something, you have to have an intention or a goal or an objective to focus on. And then we're finding that we have to teach people how to focus again. Like, what does that mean today? It's a very different thing than it meant in 2005 prior to the iPhone, or even in
Hmm.
1995 prior to the BlackBerry. The BlackBerry really started this whole thing.
Yeah. You don't think it was the Palm Pilot?
I
I'm
had a
just kidding.
wicked Palm Pilot. I was so technologically advanced.
Hold on. I'm gonna take a quick note here on my Palm Pilot.
So funny. But that I think that behaviorally there has to be a shift. And I think in education there has to be a massive shift.
Hmm.
I think in corporate America there has to be a massive shift. And I think that in corporate America, especially, one of the conversations that I've had with some leaders is, what is the priority? And, marketing does marketing and accounting does this. And my point to them is always this: everyone's responsibility is revenue generation. Like if you're in marketing, you're responsible for the aesthetic of revenue generation.
Hmm.
and and it's like you have to come to an agreement of what's the focus, and then
Right.
allow people to focus, and then allow them to also be human. Like honestly, if I'm getting 4.5 hours worth of work out of you, and Microsoft did a study in 2017 of 85 million work hours that showed that the average worker only works 2 hours and 53 minutes a day.
Hmm.
That's
That's
across
crazy.
all levels of everything.
Hmm.
What if we were able to change that to 4.5 hours?
Right.
Would you be willing to
Bump
just
it
let
up.
them go home? Would you be willing to say to them, "Hey, great job, go home and relax, go get a massage. I don't care."
Hmm.
But I think that we're at that point right now that the people's ability to focus has atrophied so bad that it's almost like going in and, like, if you broke your ankle and you never went to the doctor, yeah, we got to start at the beginning. We may have to re-break your ankle in order to make it
Hmm.
work right. Yeah. So I think over the next 10 years, I think this is going to be a movement that's embraced. And I think there's already momentum.
Yeah, I agree completely. But I also think that, we started this out talking about sports. There's a level of dedication that you see nowadays, across certain industries, like the sporting industry, where they have to be disconnected, right? In order
Right.
to, I mean, some of the stuff that you see skateboarders doing nowadays are absolutely insane. And so the only way they get to that level is obviously through disconnecting. They don't have a third arm that they're watching YouTube videos while they're doing cartwheels. I mean, so my point really is just that you do see athletes and you do see certain people who are able to connect, and so it'd be interesting to really find out how they're doing it.
But
I know that's
what percentage of those people would you say that they are? The top 1%? The top
it's
2%?
probably super slim, but I think that, when you're talking about behaviors and habits, I think that it would be interesting to really understand, what those are. For instance, I think a lot of parents use what Apple gives you to set these, 2 or 3 hour, chunks of time where you allow your kid to indulge in screen scrolling. One tactic that, that I've seen that actually does work completely is you get the kids to actually put their phones in a physical place that's not in
Hmm.
their room at night, right? As opposed to trying to like shut that thing down and use what Apple gives you to do it. Just have it, create a little station, a little charging station, and have your kids actually put the phone there. So that would be one behavior that I think actually works probably better than trying to like go in, and then settings and try to like tweak that so that, they only get a certain amount. Because when the phone's there, then it's, the idea is, well, I can mess with this and probably try and hack my way through it.
Mhm.
Dad's passcode is 1111 or whatever it is, it's something terrible. So yeah, I mean, I think that that would be a behavior that anyone could use, right?
But
Instead of
wouldn't you say though that you get
yeah.
resistance to that behavior change? Like, have you tried doing this with your daughters?
Well, I think then it's setting a habit, right?
Yeah.
Once you have the habitual routine, of course you're gonna get some grief, some feedback, It's not gonna be, yeah, let's do this awesome new thing where we remove the phone from my room. But I think once they get in the habit of doing it, I think that they realize pretty quick, like this is good. I'm not
Yeah.
doing other things. I don't know at what point it takes for a kid to realize that stuff, but I'm sure they do in other ways.
Sure. Well, it takes at the earliest outset of behavioral change, it's 100 days
Mhm.
until you actually witness and bear the fruit of behavioral change.
Sure.
And what's so fascinating is that we're such a like our society is so based on instant gratification. Like I can
Mhm.
order something on Amazon and have it at Mike's door by Sunday morning, which I did today, by the way. Let me tell you what I'm excited about. I think that I'm more interested in developing a movement of people that
Mhm.
want to reclaim their cognitive capacity and their ability to execute. And I think that the diagnosis is so easy and it's so evident that it's almost like we just need to turn the mirror around and like hold the mirror up to people. Be like,
Mhm.
do you see what's going on right now? And that's what I've had to do with this woman that is now starting her second sprint is I'm like, she's like, I did 90 minutes. I did 75 minutes of production and 15 minutes of rest, just like you
Mhm.
said. And it felt awesome. And then I say to her, great, let's add another one. She's like, holy shit, are you
Mhm.
kidding? I don't know if I could do that. Right. But we're so trained by the neuroscientists and the gambling experts to engage with these dopamine loops and like the infinite scroll that we talk about is so dangerous, so
Mhm.
dangerous. And I wanted to move beyond the phone. It's like everything in life is designed as a distraction. If you look at
Yeah.
marketing, if you look at Christmas, Christmas is the ultimate distraction. It starts in August. If you go to Costco in August, yeah,
Mhm.
Santa's right there, bro.
Yeah.
And so we're conditioned to behave in a specific way from Halloween through the end of the year.
Mhm.
And we're trained to spend money. We're trained to do all these things. And I'm not saying that any of these things are bad and that you can't find joy in these things.
Right.
But what does concern me is the level of unconsciousness that people have.
Right, right.
And I
No, I think that that's an interesting point that you made, and I think that that's one that I think a lot of people can get behind is that there is not blame here. This is, in your book, you mentioned that this is something that society has kind of, created, and right, it's more of just understanding what this is and trying to regain that cognitive sense. But I think that's an interesting part because there's a lot of there's a lot of philosophies out there, a lot of you know, th- things that sort of say like, like you were saying, the grind culture is it's more kind of blameful. It's saying like you need to work harder, you need to do this, you need to do that, regardless of anything around you. This, the Ultradian method is more like acknowledging the fact that this is going on and trying to, again, regain some of your capacities, and not to feel bad that you were a victim of this, but to really
Mhm,
try and push to become, a
mhm.
better person and, being able to focus on different things and get more done.
I also think it's really important for us to acknowledge that we've been trained to constantly add things to our lives. Like you need this and you need that. And if you're not happy, you should get this, et
Mhm.
cetera, et cetera. And what I've found over coaching for the last almost 3 decades is that um, I teach subtraction rather than addition.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm finding is that people are so much happier when they start to subtract things out of their life. And I'm not saying anything in particular, but it's unique to every person. Like, what do you need to subtract in order to focus and execute? And people will say, "Oh, I gotta stop." The biggest thing that I get with my current clients is I need to be responsive all the time. I was like, no, you don't. You can schedule your response times.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
the urgency to be available 24/7 is a universal addiction. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so anti-productive. And I find it fascinating. I find it fascinating. And I also find the reactions that I get when I bring these things up to people and how they participate in behaviors that keep them from where they would like to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a massive acknowledgement. That takes time. And so let's talk about what you and I are creating. Tell me your vision of Ultradia.
So, as you know, we've kind of worked on different parts of this, but the collaborative environment part of this is, um, you know, I think we'll have different levels of sort of visibility, right? You have, your main admin control or visibility over the people within. And then you have these, the actual community or the group that is within this venture, right? And it doesn't necessarily need to be all people from the same industry. Right. It can
Mhm.
be people that are in different lines of work. But initially, we talked about building this to really kind of fit the entrepreneur and the real estate, you know, community, and then kind of branching out and seeing, what we can do for, the corporate um, environments. But I think the entrepreneurial spirit is or the entrepreneur is really kind of the focus point currently, and I think that that's going to be um, what is going to shape kind of the rest of this. But in a nutshell, I see the community aspect of it. I see the ability for us to say, these are the type of activities that you have been doing within sprint 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ideally, we want to get to a space where the users are doing a revenue generating task within that first sprint, and then perhaps a creative after that, right?
Mhm.
But I think that, but that's going to take time to achieve. And so I think that naturally, a natural progression into having a smart, task manager with kind of a what's next button in there is letting the users get in there, use it. Obviously, it needs to be way more efficient than what's going on right now. Community visibility in what that person is doing to a certain degree. And then the ability for perhaps some AI controls to help prioritize the tasks that person has for the day. I think is really important. And then, obviously they can override the prioritization of the tasks if need be, but really something that is super easy. They get into that first sprint of the day, which is a revenue generating sprint, and they're able to literally just knock out task after task after task. Think of like a Pac-Man type of situation, right? Where they're just chomping tasks down. And then at the end of that sprint, after they've achieved completion on each of those tasks, they're marked as done, they're recorded, and then that or that goes back into like your stats dashboard to where later we can say, or the member can say, hey, the last time I did this task, it took this, that, or whatever amount of time. Management to me is way different than your calendar. And so what we're trying to do is get Ultradians out of the calendar headspace and into a pure zone where they can literally knock out task after task. Task to me is more of an individual thing. It doesn't mean that you can't have a task that then moves to somebody else to do their thing, but it just means that it's something that I need to do. I need to create a report. I need to reach out to, a couple of prospects. I need to do these things. A meeting is obviously different. A meeting is something that's already in your calendar. So the idea is looking at the calendar, assessing these potential sprint times that somebody could have within their calendar, and then us being able to help those users to apply a logical set list of tasks for each sprint that they're able to achieve during the week. And like you said earlier, if they can only fit one in per week, hey, we'll start with that. If they can fit one in per day, great. If their only time is 7:30 to 9, we're going to ask. The technology will say, hey, are you okay, putting the sprint here? So I think that's kind of like the pure environment that I think of when I think of the Ultradia platform, ultradia.io specifically. That's kind of the headspace that I'm in. What do you think?
I think what you just said is wonderful. I just had a vision of education. And it's interesting because students in the United States are in class from, let's say, 8:30 to 3:30. And would it be like if we created a community, a collaborative community of students within a specific high school or within multiple high schools that from 7 o'clock to 9:30, they blocked out effective time to handle what they need to handle. Or maybe it's 5 to 9:30. I don't know what the time is, right? But
Hmm.
I think that we could go to the educational community and be like, look, we want to create a platform for students that they can be collaboratively accountable to each other and be not only authentic in what they're trying to accomplish, but transparent in what they are actually accomplishing. And these measurements will provide huge amounts of data for you as the school, and it will all be anonymized. It's not like it's going to be like, oh, Mike, you have this problem. But
Sure, sure.
we're gonna anonymize data and say, hey, look, by 7:23, people are exhausted.
Hmm.
So we need to double check how we're doing this. And what that could lead to is, and there's elementary schools that do this, they give no homework because
Right.
they realize that cognitively they're impaired after school. Well, what if we then brought that to a corporate standpoint where we created, like, we understood and the objective and the intention was created by leadership.
Hmm.
And then all of those things, the tasks flow down from leadership. This is what I need you to focus on today, and this is how long I need you to focus on it.
Right.
But the trick that we're going to have is not having it feel punitive,
Right.
right? Like, especially from a corporate standpoint.
Right. But I also think that there could be good in the idea that everyone is an entrepreneur, right? Even if you're
Mm,
working in a corporate space, if you give somebody that leeway to be their own entrepreneur, to try and figure out efficiencies in their job they're doing, to get credit for them, you know, to create their own day, right? I mean, obviously, maybe you're talking about more kind of senior level, perhaps, but maybe not. I mean, I think that there needs to be at some point an evolution in the corporate space too, right? I mean, the
mhm.
whole idea of like get here by 8, leave here at 5, no matter how efficient you are, like you're just going to grind out more work is lost, right? After the pandemic, people started to kind of go back to work. A lot of people wanted to have more of a hybrid schedule. So I think that corporate needs to change too. And maybe, this is one of the answers to that. It's saying, hey, we're going to create a different platform here. We're going to create these more sprint based days where you have your 75 minutes on 15-minute breaks. And I think that's more of a natural way of working, like you
Mhm.
were saying, like in Finland, they don't get homework. In classrooms now that's evolving too. Like you mentioned, I mean, there's more group settings. They're trying to break kids up into these different groups. So everything's evolving. Corporate needs to as well from a human standpoint, human resources standpoint. I think it needs to evolve too. So yeah, I think this is a good time for sure.
I think it's a wonderful time for a revolution. And I also want to say that you and I are not anti-technology at all, but we are
Right.
about harnessing technology in a way that serves you. And I think that that starts with the recognition of how people are engaging with technology today in a way that actually harms them.
Hmm.
And I think that once we can point out the symptom, it's like, man, my stomach hurts all the time. Well, that's a symptom of something,
Right.
right? And then all of a sudden we identify that it's your appendix and it needs to be taken out. That's where we're at right now, is we've identified the symptom. And now what we need to do is take action. But we need to take action in an incremental way that allows people to be successful.
Right.
And that does involve technology. Let me ask you a quick question. How are you or how are we designing the product so that it's not just another distraction?
So, we've discussed this a bit, but the first thing that comes to mind is going back to some of those means of communication that some people feel are a little outdated. Email, right? That would be the first one that I would think about. But again, teaching behaviors, creating better behaviors is the key to all of this, and helping, assisting people with that. As a consultant, as you know, for many years, which you've done, Pete, I think that's the core of this, is really to like try and get in and have people understand what the behavior is that they're trying to change, and how they can change that behavior. I think that's the core element here, for
But what
sure.
what to be even more forward, you and I are designing a product that is anti-distraction.
Correct. So no pings, trying to remove the pings. I mean, it doesn't mean that we can't have helpful messaging in there, but we're trying to create these behaviors based on, for instance, perhaps there's an email that goes out Sunday night, says these are your tasks for the week. This is the assessment that we've done. This is how AI has helped to prioritize them. Or if you don't want to use AI, turn that function off. And they would look at the way that it's prioritized. They could evaluate it and move some stuff around, say I'm good to go. I mean, that whole time period, it doesn't have to take more than 10 minutes, right? They have a good
Mhm.
idea of what they're doing the next day, and they're set for the week.
Well, and we could
That
even break down the
that's a
email to say
behavior.
objectives, tension,
Sure.
focus, and execution. We could have that tier scaffold that like
Absolutely.
that would be really interesting to receive that on a Sunday night and say,
Right.
okay, here's your week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Yeah, that would be fascinating to me.
Yeah. And I think also, these emails that I speak of, again, if the system sees that a lot of the tasks are of a certain nature, and maybe
Mhm.
they fall under one specific pillar of work, like creative, and maybe nothing's rev gen. Maybe there's a little message that pops up at some point, or an email that says, hey, over the last week, these are your focuses. We've noticed that all of this is over in these pillars, but not in this kind of rev gen. Just not no like severe warnings. Just, hey, by the way, because I was thinking about our business together, and how these communities can be created, these groups within the app. If you have somebody that is really really good at development, right, or design or whatever, and that's their main focus. You have somebody else in your group like yourself, Pete, who's good at marketing, and getting out there and doing the rev gen stuff. Um, if you're a duo or you're a team, from a business standpoint, you can have that, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody on your team has to do that. If you are your own self, your own business, absolutely, you should have tasks within all of the tiers or the pillars, of the function, the business function. But if you're working hand in hand, if you're working with a team, you can have a person that sits over here that is more of a creative, and that typically does more creative tasks. And then you kind of your rev generation be, a different person on your team, right? You're still working towards the same goal, just one person's focus. That's typically how corporate works anyways, right?
Well, but it's interesting because most people don't, I would say. And
Mhm.
what I mean by that is everyone should be working towards their genius, right? What
Agreed.
am I
And if you're a
genius?
team, I should know what you're doing for rev gen.
Right.
You should know what I'm doing for creative. And so, as a holistic force, right, from a business standpoint, you should definitely know what other people are doing and move the ball forward
Right. And
together.
so what
Right.
I'm saying is like work to your genius and either partner or staff to your weakness,
Sure.
right? And I think that that's what you and I do incredibly well
Mhm.
is we both know where I begin and end, and I know where you begin and end. And we're like this. We have mutual strengths that
Yeah.
we can communicate with. But I think what I'm so excited about, Mike, and I predict that this will be true by June, is that we'll have the MVP out.
Mhm.
And we'll have the alpha out. We're planning on March. We'll have the beta out, let's say May, and the MVP soon thereafter. But what I'm so excited about is the collaborative nature of it without distraction. right? Like
Mm,
we will tell you how you're performing compared to everybody else. You're not going to have to communicate with everybody that's in your ultradian circle
sure.
to make that happen. And then
Yeah.
you can also communicate out and say, "Hey, I kicked ass today. This is wonderful. I'm so excited. I haven't done this in 10 months." Celebrate, right? And
Right.
get feedback, authentic feedback from people. But it's not going to be a messaging app. And we are absolutely 100% not creating a social network.
Right.
We have
Right.
we have no interest in creating a social network.
Yep.
So I'm
Absolutely.
super excited. I'm super grateful to be doing this with you.
Yeah. And now you, man. This is going to be great.
It is going to be wonderful. So everybody that's listening, I'm going to ask that you support our Kickstarter, which launches Tuesday, January 6th at 7:30 a.m. I'm going to put a link in so that you can just click the link. Uh, Mike, I'm really grateful for your time and your energy.
Yeah, Pete. Thanks so much. It's
All
going to
right,
be
man. Have a
amazing.
great day.
Yep.